The air in that lakeside kitchen, normally crisp with the scent of pine and fresh coffee, was instead thick and metallic, stinging my lungs like inhaled rust. 0. The numbers stared back at me from the banking app, a stark, brutal void where 5 years of my life, of late nights, careful budgeting, and deferred dreams should have been. My name is Florence, and for most of my life, I believed family was something solid, something you could lean on without wondering if it would collapse beneath you. We are told, in every language, that family is an immutable truth, a constant. Immutable, unchangeable, fixed permanently. This word emphasizes the perceived permanence of family bonds. But standing there, facing the smirk of my brother-in-law, Kyle, the reality was a sudden, violent demolition of that fundamental belief. My hands, still cold from having dipped them in the lake just an hour earlier, felt impossibly heavy, yet my focus was unnervingly sharp. I had spent my formative years in Portland, in a small house that smelled of sawdust and Sunday coffee, the values of hard work and probity, a commitment to integrity and uprightness, especially in financial matters, ingrained by my parents who ran a humble hardware store. My sister, Allison, always seemed to orbit a different reality, chasing excitement while I anchored myself in responsibility. This contrast, this dichotomy of character, became the fault line upon which our shared grief was built after a drunk driver took our parents. The inheritance was modest. I invested mine into the boutique I had always dreamed of, while Allison invested hers into Kyle, a man whose charm was as loud as his ambition was hollow. He entered her life like a charismatic predator, and slowly, surely, Allison's bright spirit began to diminish, her voice softening, her eyes constantly seeking his approval, a clear sign that her agency, her ability to act independently, was being slowly eroded. The lake house reunion, meant as a family reset by Uncle Robert, was a deliberate stage for Kyle's final, calculated act. The subtle angling of my laptop screen, the wiped browser history, these were not mere accidents. They were the hushed prelude to a violent financial coup de grace. Coup de grace, a final, decisive blow or act, often one that ends a painful situation, literally stroke of mercy in French, but here used ironically. My initial denial, the internal struggle to rationalize the payment declined notice as a mere technical hiccup, quickly dissolved into a sickening clarity when my business partner, Claire, called. The word 0 on my screen was not just a loss of money, it was a profound personal violation, an attack on my carefully constructed future. When I walked into that kitchen, I was not merely an accuser, I was a witness to an act of moral cowardice, and the silence that followed my announcement, broken only by Kyle's short, smug dismissal, was the sound of two sisters standing on opposite sides of an abyss. His utterance, "We needed it more than you," was not a confession of need, but a statement of deeply held entitlement, revealing a moral compass so broken it spun wildly off true north. It was in that moment of absolute loss that the true journey began, transitioning from a state of passive victimhood into active, strategic resistance. The shock, instead of causing me to falter, became a catalyst. It was the brutal clarity that precedes a revolutionary act, the instant the protagonist in any great historical narrative realizes their moment of awakening has arrived. This was not the end of Florence, it was the genesis of a new, formidable self. Genesis, the origin or mode of formation of something. If the most crushing betrayals are the ones that reveal a profound truth about human nature, then what new strength is forged in the crucible of absolute disillusionment? The sudden, paralyzing stillness that gripped the living room was a temporary vacuum, instantly filled by the icy resolve that settled deep within my bones. Kyle's smug confidence, his ability to dismiss years of my disciplined savings with a single, contemptuous laugh, was not just insulting, it was an act of profound psychological warfare, designed to render me powerless and silent. This is a common tactic of financial abusers and con artists throughout history, from the infamous Charles Ponzi to modern-day cyber scammers. The reliance on the victim's shock and social pressure to keep the peace to ensure they don't pursue justice. Kyle had misjudged me, mistaking my initial shock for total defeat. In English learning, We often discuss the power of understatement, a deliberate presentation of something as being smaller, less important, or worse than it actually is, and Kyle's dismissal was a masterclass in this. An understatement of the seriousness of his crime. But it was in this very moment that my own narrative began to shift. The tremors in my legs were not of weakness, but the gathering energy of a retaliatory strike, a counter-narrative that would dismantle his arrogant foundation. My quiet declaration, "Then you won't mind what's coming next," was a pivot point. The ensuing confrontation, wherein Kyle moved aggressively only to be checked by the sudden, steadfast intervention of Uncle Robert, a figure of quiet, dependable authority, was a vivid, character-driven moment that spoke volumes about true loyalty. Robert's action was a classic example of standing in the breach, a military idiom meaning to defend a gap in the defenses, here representing the moral defense of the family's ethical code. Historically, moments of profound betrayal often lead to extraordinary legal or personal innovations. Consider the 17th century English legal reforms that sought to protect property rights with greater vigor following periods of intense civil strife and opportunism. My own small innovation, the quiet, background security tool I had installed following a minor hacking attempt months earlier, was my personal, digital bastion. This tool, designed to photograph unauthorized access attempts, log keystrokes, and timestamp every action, was my digital witness, an infallible recorder of the truth. Infallible, incapable of making mistakes or being wrong. As I reached for my phone, Kyle lunged, his mask of composure finally cracking, revealing the panic beneath the smug surface. This was a classic high-stakes emotional development. The villain, once secure in his plot, is faced with the unpredictable variable. Allison's subsequent, heartbreaking cry, "I'm tired, Kyle. I'm tired of lying for you," was the seismic crack that split their toxic relationship wide open. It was an act of profound, agonizing self-liberation, mirroring the universal human struggle to escape oppressive control, a struggle often depicted in literature from Jane Austen's heroines to contemporary psychological thrillers. Her statement, while softly delivered, carried the weight of years of silenced suffering. The ensuing, violent bang at the front door was the external manifestation of the inner upheaval, a physical symbol of justice arriving with implacable force. Implacable, unable to be appeased or stopped. The arrival of Detective Harmon and the Portland police, armed not with speculation, but with the bank's own cybersecurity flags and a traceable digital trail from the lake house, shattered Kyle's last vestiges of control. His immediate, desperate stuttering, the attempt to twist the narrative into an anonymous hacking, was instantly, irrevocably undermined by the detective's factual correction. The login attempts came from a recognized device. The stage was now set for the final, devastating reveal, a moment of universal truth, that even the most meticulously planned betrayal leaves a digital footprint, and in the modern world, truth is often found in the quiet, undeniable logs of technology. When the villain's vaunted confidence, exaggeratedly boasted or praised, is shown to be a brittle facade, does the ensuing silence belong to justice served, or to the profound shock of the witness? The quiet presentation of the evidence was the ultimate, cold-blooded theater of justice. When I handed Detective Harmon my phone, allowing her to scroll through the time-stamped, high-resolution photographs of Kyle at my laptop, his face illuminated by the screen's glow in the dead of night, his intense focus betraying the furtive act he was committing, the narrative arc of his arrogance reached its inevitable, humiliating conclusion. This moment serves as a powerful modern-day allegory for the eternal philosophical teaching that no man is an island when it comes to accountability. The interconnectedness of our digital world means every action leaves an indelible trace. In the grand tradition of storytelling, this was the moment of denouement, the final part of a play, film, or narrative in which the strands of the plot are drawn together and matters are explained or resolved. Kyle's immediate shift from smug dismissiveness to sputtering, frantic denial was a vivid character moment, a complete disintegration of his persona. The officer's professional, efficient movement as they cuffed him, the sound of the metal clasp an echoing punctuation mark to years of his toxic behavior, was a sobering realization for everyone present. Historically, the pursuit of justice, particularly against figures of assumed authority, has always been difficult. From the Magna Carta's limitations on arbitrary royal power to the modern laws protecting citizens against corporate and financial malfeasance. My small, independent act of installing the security software aligned with the universal wisdom that self-protection requires vigilance, the state of keeping careful watch for possible danger or difficulties, and forethought. The true emotional development, however, belonged to Allison. As Kyle thrashed and shouted her name, attempting to use his last, desperate measure of control, her response was not one of submission, but of profound, quiet strength. "You did it," she whispered, a simple statement that negated years of his coercive lies. This was her true moment of emancipation, a psychological breaking of chains far stronger than the physical ones placed on Kyle's wrists. Her final, devastating line, "I was nothing with you," was the ultimate rejection of his toxic identity, a powerful universal message about the necessity of separating one's self-worth from an abuser's control. The clinking of his wedding band against the cuffs as they led him away was a final, chilling note of irony, symbolizing a union dissolved not by paperwork, but by the weight of his own malevolence. Malevolence, the state or condition of being malicious, intense ill will. The abrupt, jarring departure of Kyle left a void that was not empty but rather filled with a restorative silence. As Allison finally collapsed into my arms, the tears she shed were not of sorrow but of relief, a deeply engaging and transformative character moment. This embrace between the two sisters, once separated by years of different choices and a toxic presence, became a powerful symbol of restored familial bond and mutual recognition of past pain. Detective Harmon's update, the high probability of fund recovery, coupled with the long-term removal of Kyle's ability to exert threats and coercion, was the necessary validation of the process. It connected the painful personal story to the modern relevance of legal frameworks and cybersecurity in protecting individual assets and emotional safety. As I looked out the window where Kyle had gloated just an hour before, I realized that the narrative of my life had not been permanently damaged. It had simply undergone an abrupt, necessary rewrite. If the true mark of freedom is not the absence of external chains, but the restoration of internal agency, how does one begin the slow, deliberate work of trusting the foundation of one's own life again? The house, once a suffocating stage for betrayal, transformed into a space of quiet reclamation, the process of restoring or gaining back something that was lost or taken. The scent of lingering tension dissipated, replaced by a light, almost ethereal quality, as if the walls themselves had exhaled. This sense of renewal, of a space being made safe again, is an enduring human need, often mirrored in historical events where communities or nations rebuild after conflict or tyranny. My first quiet victory came in the form of Detective Harmon's follow-up call. The majority of the stolen funds had been traced and would be returned, the remaining losses covered by the bank's fraud protection policies. The 5 years of my life, the physical manifestation of my hard work, had been saved. This news allowed me to sit down, truly breathe, and process the full weight of the event, transitioning from reactive crisis mode to proactive healing. The emotional development of my sister, Allison, unfolded with equal significance. She didn't stay in the paralyzing guilt of her past choices. Instead, she took decisive, pivotal action, acting as a vital point or factor, filing for divorce and moving into my apartment temporarily. Her presence, initially marked by soft apologies and a cautious demeanor, slowly began to shift. I consistently reminded her that her survival of Kyle's abuse was a testament to her endurance, not a marker of her weakness. This philosophical teaching, that strength is found not in avoiding falls, but in choosing to get back up, is a universal wisdom essential to personal growth. The act of sharing a space, a small return to the familiar comfort of sisterhood, began the slow, necessary process of rebuilding trust and mutual respect. The physical, symbolic act of the family gathering again at the lake house a week later, not for forced gaiety, but for a genuine reset, was deeply engaging. Repainting the storm-damaged porch railings, fixing the windows Kyle had slammed in an argument, and throwing open every curtain to invite the sunlight back in were ritualistic acts of catharsis, cleansing the space of its dark history. Catharsis, the process of releasing and thereby providing relief from strong or repressed emotions. This communal effort underscored the modern relevance of emotional processing, that healing is often a collective rather than a solitary endeavor. For me, standing on the dock and watching the water ripple, the philosophical understanding crystallized. Justice does not erase the pain, but it acts as a necessary adjunct, something added to another thing but not essential to it, to healing. Clearing the psychological space for growth to occur. This truth is mirrored in various historical peace commissions and restorative justice movements, where accountability is recognized as a prerequisite for genuine reconciliation. A month later, the sight of sunlight spilling across the new displays in my second boutique was the final, satisfying chapter in my personal narrative. The money was back, the business was thriving, and I was firmly grounded in a life I had meticulously and resiliently rebuilt. Allison's visit that afternoon, her smile steady and genuine, was the final character moment of transformation. She was not healed, but she was definitely healing, actively moving towards an independent future. This journey, from absolute betrayal to hard-won restoration, underscored the ultimate universal wisdom that the most important boundaries are not the ones we build around our property, but the ones we enforce around our hearts and our dignity. In the end, the family that truly mattered, the one defined by shared values and mutual respect, not just blood, was the one that reclaimed its own peace. After surviving a seismic shift that forces a total reevaluation of trust, how can the wisdom gained from profound loss be transformed into a durable, unshakable foundation for the future? The final phase of this deeply engaging journey was one of measured, resilient construction, moving beyond mere survival to a state of unfettered flourishing free from restraints or bonds. The reclaimed funds were not just bank digits, they were a symbolic affirmation of my self-worth and my capacity for foresight, turning a moment of betrayal into a blueprint for a more secure future. The philosophical teaching here is that adversity is not merely something to be overcome, but a harsh teacher that illuminates vulnerabilities one must then diligently fortify. My second boutique's opening was a powerful, tangible assertion of independence. This modern relevance, the entrepreneurial spirit as an act of personal and financial emancipation, is a recurring theme throughout history. From women finding economic independence in post-war eras to present-day individuals building online businesses to escape restrictive conditions. The shop, bathed in sunlight, was a monument to the resilience of the human spirit. The compelling English used to describe this final chapter reflects a sense of calm authority, a stark contrast to the panicked confusion of the lakehouse kitchen. For instance, the feeling of being unflappable, having or showing calmness in a crisis, became my new defining characteristic. Allison, now living independently and actively managing her divorce, became a partner in this new chapter. Her volunteering at the boutique on weekends, carefully handling inventory and learning the trade, was a character moment of profound, quiet redemption. Her small, consistent efforts demonstrated a genuine desire to understand and adopt the values of hard work and self-reliance that had always anchored me. This was her apprenticeship in life, a chance to learn from the consequences of her past choices and Kyle's negative influence. We often discuss the importance of clear communication, a core element of English learning and universal wisdom. We learn to speak directly, without the need for the kind of subtle, loaded language that defined her relationship with Kyle. This directness, often called plain dealing in idiomatic English, restored the authenticity to our relationship. This period of recovery also connected to true historical elements, particularly the concept of restorative justice, an approach that focuses on the needs of the victims and the offenders and the community as a whole, rather than solely on punishment. While Kyle faced the legal consequences, my focus remained on restoring my sister's sense of self and strengthening the family unit. The family, now redefined by mutual respect and accountability, engaged in honest, difficult conversations of vital emotional development that created a new, stronger foundation. This whole experience, in its totality, distilled down to a single, essential piece of universal wisdom. Blood doesn't give anyone the right to hurt you. Boundaries do. This statement is a powerful philosophical teaching, replacing the de rigueur societal assumption of unconditional loyalty with the healthier, more sustainable principle of self-respect and ethical limits. It's a message that resonates across cultures and epochs, empowering the individual to define their relationships by the quality of the treatment they receive, not by accident of birth. The final shot of the video, a close-up of my hands, no longer cold from the lake water or trembling from shock, but confidently arranging a display in my thriving store, would encapsulate the transformation. It would be an epigrammatic visual summary of the journey. Epigrammatic, concise, clever, and often paradoxical. The zero account was not the moment I broke, it was the moment I woke up, realizing that the greatest asset is not money, but the knowledge of your own unbreakable worth.